Asia Minor, the 2nd century BC. Throughout history, cities built around seaports have been a magnet for cultural activities. Conduits for goods, people, and ideas. In the Greek cities of the Orient, science and philosophy found fertile ground. Encompassing the west coast of Asia Minor and the islands of the eastern Mediterranean was an area known as Ionia. It was here that an illustrious group of thinkers and scientists existed during the classical and Hellenistic periods. Their legacy is still visible in the archaeological remains of island and coastal cities. The theories and findings of architects and scientists have stood the test of time and are with us to this day. The first millennium BC was a period of Greek colonization in the Mediterranean. To the west, in the direction of Sicily and the Magna Graecia, and to the east, into the Aegean Islands and onward to the coasts of Ionia. The Oriental Greek colonies, both those on islands such as Delos, Kos and Rhodes, now part of modern Greece, and the ones along the Ionian coast, such as Priene and Miletus in modern-day Turkey, were crossroads for both mercantile and cultural exchange. This was an area where the coastal Mediterranean civilizations, the Carthaginians, the Egyptians, and the Greeks, met and traded with the peoples of the Far East, the Persians and the Indians. The caravans, laden with goods to trade, traveled overland from the Orient and needed ships to continue their trip towards the west. As a result, Ionian coastal cities and other towns on the nearby islands prospered both economically and culturally. Art and science flourished. Public speaking by poets, orators, and philosophers was part of daily life. In the ancient city of Priene, archaeologists unearthed a strange tiered building with a square floor plan. They concluded it must have been used for public gatherings, either a bouleuterion, the meeting place of the city senate, or else an ecclesiasterion, where the people held their assemblies. Excavations also revealed this theatre, with a capacity of nearly 5,000. The square building, on the other hand, only sat 640. Evaluating these two constructions in the light of the area of the excavated city, and by studying historical sources regarding the size and number of inhabitants of Priene, scholars believe that the people assembled in the open-air theatre, while the Senate met in the smaller roofed bouleuterion. Here's what the Senate chamber would have looked like in ancient times. pulpit was reserved for orators and their public speeches. The Greek philosophers from the Hellenistic period were divided into several different schools, and the most illustrious of them, the Epicurean school, sought to spread its doctrine among the local senators. The Epicureans believed that by adhering to a model of proper life and an ideal of wisdom, a person could achieve happiness, a concept attractive to the senators of Priene. Epicureans had a sense of pride in their land, believing Ionia was the birthplace of philosophy. Its forefathers came from the school of Ionian scholars many centuries earlier. Thales, Anaximenes, and Anaximander, the first cartographer to create a map of the entire world, and the first man, predating Darwin by over 2 millennia, to argue the concept of evolution, claiming that humans had evolved from fish. As the city of Priene was gradually excavated, archaeologists discovered it was unique. Everywhere they dug, they found stairway after stairway. There were stairs at every change in elevation. Why? Did the townspeople prefer this solution to sloping roads, or did they not know how to build them? Or was there another reason? When researchers recreated a map of the city with its original streets and buildings, they found that the city was laid out on a perfectly orthogonal road grid. In addition, all the east-west streets were level, while those running north-south had steps to lead to the various levels of the city. Clearly intentional, but who conceived it? And why? The answer lay in philosophy. Ancient sources record that it was an Ionian philosopher, Hippodamus of Miletus, who founded the science of urban planning. Instead of letting a city grow in a haphazard fashion, Hippodamus felt it should first be drawn out rationally on a map, preferably laid out on an orthogonal grid with precise functions assigned to each neighborhood. Hippodamus went on to design cities throughout the Greek Empire. Not far from Priene on the Ionian coast was Hippodamus's birthplace. In the late 1800s, researchers discovered a city with grand colonnaded avenues, enormous baths, and sumptuous buildings. Was it the powerful city of Miletus, which changed hands several times between the Persians and the Greeks? Everything seemed to support this hypothesis, except the fact that Miletus was a coastal city, while this site was 6 miles from the sea. Archaeologists remained in doubt until they unearthed this construction. With its piers and moorings, it could only have been one thing: a harbor. Not far off, they discovered another harbor, overlooked by a theater with a seating capacity of 15,000, one of the largest in the Greek Orient. Although the sea wasn't there when archaeologists discovered the city, it was there before. Near the ruins is the Meander River. Over the centuries, the river deposited enormous quantities of sediments and pushed the coastline further out from where it had been during the first millennium BC. In the process, it buried most of the city and left another large section immersed in swampy land. Excavations later confirmed that the archaeologists had indeed found Miletus. when they drew a map of the various buildings, they realized that here too, as in Priene, the city had been laid out according to the urban planning philosophy of the city's most illustrious son, Hippodamus of Miletus. As well as the perpendicular streets, what was interesting was the concept of functionalism developed by the urban planner. Each area had a specific building type. The two harbours, the Lion Harbour and the Theatre Harbour, were linked by an L-shaped zone where all the civil, commercial and religious buildings were found. At the edges were the residential areas. The true philosopher has to refuse all that's irrational, avoid strong passions and chaos, and dedicate himself unswervingly to rational thought. The Epicureans believed that human bodies were products of the earth, just like stones and plants. There was nothing immortal about the human soul. Therefore, people should forget their fears of gods and punishment in the afterlife, and live for today, conferring value only on things that could help them during their lifetime. Hippodamus's urban planning scheme adhered to that philosophy. On Delos, a small but important island in the eastern Mediterranean, archaeologists uncovered a series of terraces with buildings dedicated to the worship of various divinities. Inscriptions and statues led to surprising discoveries. All the sanctuaries in this area paid homage to foreign gods. Serapis, Isis and Anubis, venerated by the Egyptians, as well as the Sabiri, worshipped in the Samothrakion, a sanctuary built to the gods of Samothraki. Why was there such a large presence of non-Greek gods on this Greek isle? Scholars consulted various ancient texts and discovered, with the help of the historian and geographer Strabo, that Delos was home to the ancient world's largest slave market. Merchants and slave dealers arrived from all over the world to buy and sell the most important economic resource of those times, manual labor. Delos became a kind of crossroads in the Mediterranean and went out of its way to offer its visitors a vast area for worship, later named by archaeologists as the Terrace of Strangers. An influential visitor to Delos might be invited to the home of affluent Greeks. Delos was also the legendary home of the god Apollo. Not far away, another island, Kos, was mentioned by Strabo as being rich and ornamented. Its main city was not large, but according to the Roman historian, it was the most beautiful of all, known for its architecture and later for the marvelous mosaics that excavations revealed. Archaeologists, with the help of mythology, tried to give names to the figures portrayed. This is Zeus disguised as a bull kidnapping Europa. Here, Eros is depicted as a fisherman. And here is the Judgment of Paris. But who is this person arriving on Kos by boat? And who is waiting for him? The answer came from these ruins, one of the many sanctuaries of the ancient world dedicated to Asclepius, the Greek god of medicine. This is a building that was used to care for the sick. But the Kos sanctuary has a special distinction. As stated in literary sources, it was built after the death of the greatest doctor of the ancient world, Hippocrates, who held lessons on Kos in the shade of a plane tree. Hippocrates was the first to write a scientific treatise on medicine, freeing this art from its association with magic and grounding it firmly in experience and the observation of nature. The mosaic represents a passing of the torch from the god Asclepius arriving on Kos to Hippocrates, who awaits him on shore. The large sanctuary was built by exponents of Hippocratic thought as both a place for treatment of the sick and also a medical and philosophical school, an enormous monument to medical progress. One of the great themes at this time in the pursuit of happiness and wisdom was the achievement of victory over pain. Hippocrates had founded a bona fide school of medicine on Kos, which his disciples carried forward for centuries, a school which was located under this portico. Here, philosophers would gather with the great masters of medical art and debate the concept of pain. On the second terrace is where the priests were located. They were part of the sanctuary dedicated to religious rites in honor of the god Asclepius. These rites persisted in spite of the fact that Hippocrates had made a science of medicine, complete with a text that encompassed all medical knowledge, the Hippocratic collection, and a code that established rules of behavior for those practicing the noble art of medicine, the Hippocratic Oath, still sworn by doctors today. Even though religious symbols were strong at the sanctuary, with the prominent temple of Asclepius standing out on the third and highest terrace, Hippocrates was still recognized as the greatest doctor of all time. He took medicine out of the hands of priests, understanding that all diseases had natural causes, never mystical ones. He knew they could be traced back to the climate and condition of the body in the immediate environment. He even thought the type of government could affect illness, promoting democracy over tyranny on the basis of its beneficial effects on health. Among these colonnades, the main treatment area where the sick were bedded and healed, philosophers would have ready examples to support their theory, how the absence of pain contributes to peace of mind and therefore to happiness. In cases where recovery was delayed or did not arrive at all, there was another philosophy available. If a man succeeded in detaching himself from his passions and attaining inner peace, called ataraxia by the Epicureans, physical pain would be tolerable. Violent pain could be handled because it did not last, while chronic pain could eventually be ignored. In 1936, an Italian archaeologist, Luciano Laurenzi, digging on the island of Rhodes along the walls of the city of the same name, unearthed, one by one, a series of heavy stone spheres. There were hundreds of them in all sizes. The smallest weighed 4 pounds, and the largest almost 600. What would so many heavy balls have been used for? It was soon clear that Laurenzi had discovered a large arsenal. The stone balls were projectiles for catapults used before the days of cannon. Did the quantity of ammunition relate to some exceptional event in the history of Rhodes? Historical records supported this theory. In 305 BC, a great military leader, Demetrius Poliorcetes, attacked the wealthy city of Rhodes. Rhodes had the largest grain market in the entire Mediterranean and was a flourishing center for banking. Not surprisingly, it attracted the interest of conquerors and military leaders. although Demetrius had overcome many other cities and had brought powerful war machines with him for this battle, he was defeated. As a testament to their invincibility, and perhaps also as a warning to those approaching the island with bellicose intent, the Rhodians built the largest statue ever seen. The 30-meter-tall bronze Colossus of Rhodes, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Archaeologists wondered what techniques the Rhodians had used to forge and erect such a formidable giant statue. The most plausible hypothesis is that the Rhodian sculptors did not cast the statue as a single piece, which was impossible, but superimposed multiple layers of bronze at different times. As the statue slowly grew in size, the sculptors realized that the higher the statue became, the bigger the body parts had to be, so that the beholder on the ground could have a proper perspective. So the statue was made relatively light at the base and significantly heavier towards the top. It was probably this factor that led to its sudden collapse. Soon after its construction, an earthquake toppled the great Colossus of Rhodes. A few centuries later, it was sold for scrap and melted down. The Colossus of Rhodes was an experiment, a completely innovative project from which designers drew important lessons for further achievements in art and engineering. The Ionian Greeks named the land they had settled Anatolia, from the Greek word rising sun. The images and art they left behind, the illuminating philosophical thought, the architectural advances, the medical heritage, were indeed beacons of enlightenment. The mercantile aspects of the land brought wealth, and it was wisely put to use in developing knowledge and wisdom at the service of mankind. An approach that could only find a homeland in the most open and cosmopolitan part of Greece, the Far Eastern region, washed by the sea and in contact with distant lands. Here, the mind was given free rein, nurtured and admired so it could flourish, allowed to expand in bursts of creation and fulfill its potential.